Good morning, everyone. We're so glad you're joining us here at Faith Boulevard again. I hope that you had a good Easter weekend. And I'm sorry you weren't, for those of you who prepared for Lads to Leaders. I'm so sorry you didn't get to do that. And maybe sometime when this is over, we can hear all your speeches and your song leading. Wouldn't that be great? I would love to do that. All right, let's get back to our saga of Jacob and his sons. If you remember last time, we were talking about how Jacob was making the same mistake that his dad, Isaac, made because he picked a favorite son, didn't he? He picked Rachel's oldest son, Joseph. And of course, that just made the older 10 brothers angry with him, didn't it? They were always angry with him, Dad's favorite. And to make matters worse, what does he do? He gives him that beautiful robe. They didn't get a beautiful robe. Now they're really jealous. And the Bible says, you remember, that they didn't even have one kind word to say to him. Isn't that awful? And then God gives him 2 dreams. And he tells his brothers those dreams, whether he should have or he shouldn't have. He did, didn't he? And he said, your bundles of grain were bowing down to mine. And the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. And even his father was troubled by that. Well, you mean your mother and I are going to bow down to you someday? But Joseph knew, I think, that that dream was from God, but he didn't understand it, but he knew it must be from God. Remember, his father sent him to go find his brothers who were watching their sheep and go to Shechem. And they weren't at Shechem, so he had to go to Dothan. But they see him coming, don't they? And they say, here comes that dreamer. And then they start figuring out a way to get rid of him for good. And they decide they're just going to kill him. But Reuben steps in, doesn't he? Wait a minute. Let's don't keep his blood on our hands for the rest of our lives. We could just throw him into this pit. He's going to eventually die, you know. And then we didn't actually kill him. And so they take his robe, tear it off of him, right? They take that robe off and throw him into that pit. Now, remember, Reuben was the oldest. And the Bible tells us he had a plan. He was going to go back when the brothers weren't watching and rescue Joseph, take him back home to their dad. Probably not because he actually loved Joseph or that he liked him better than his brothers, but because Reuben was the oldest. And who's going to take the blame if something happens to Joseph? It's going to be the oldest son, Reuben. And he doesn't want that. So he thinks he's got his plan. But remember, those brothers sit down to eat their meal. And the Bible tells us they could hear him crying and screaming, right? Please come and save me. And instead, they see some traders coming in, the Ishmaelites that were headed to Egypt. And they thought, oh, here's our plan. This is better than ever. Let's just do this. Let's sell him. We'll have some money out of the deal. We'll be rid of him. And yet we didn't kill him. Hey, it's a win-win, right? So that's what they do. They sell their 17-year-old brother to some traders headed to Egypt, and he's going to be a slave the rest of his life, right? That's okay. They didn't kill him. That's all they care about. Now they have to figure out what to tell Dad. So remember they had to kill a goat, and they put the goat's blood on the robe, and then they take the robe and say, is this your son's robe? And of course he knew it was, and he said, oh, he had to have been killed by a wild animal. Oh, my son, my son. Now, if you remember, Jacob tricked his dad, Isaac, the same way with a goat, using the skin of that goat, didn't he? So that his dad would think he was Esau, and he gave him Esau's blessing. Now, for the next 20 years, though, his brothers are going to have to watch his dad. He said, I will never, ever be happy again. I'm going to mourn and cry for Joseph the rest of my life. I don't think they thought about that, did they? But now let's find out what happens to Joseph. So he travels from where he lives here in Hebron, right here, and the traders take him down to the country of Egypt, the land of the pyramids. So he gets down there, and he's sold as a slave to one of Potiphar's officials who works in the palace with Pharaoh, and that's what the Egyptians call their king, was Pharaoh. Now, he's captain of the guards, which means he's in charge of the prison. All right, he's over the prison. Well, he buys Joseph and he takes him home. But here's what I want you to know. Joseph, how do you think he must have been feeling right now? Like God had left him? Like nobody cared for him? His father, who always protected him, he's gone. He's not there. Who's going to take care of him now? Who's going to protect him? But I think Joseph inside must have realized that God was going to be with him. Do you remember that memory verse? For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for you to prosper, not for calamity, to give you a future and a hope. And I think Joseph, somewhere deep down inside, felt that, because we read in Genesis chapter 39, we read that the Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master Potiphar. And when his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, he makes him head of all his household. I'm sure it took several years, but there it was. Now Joseph the slave becomes the head of Potiphar's household. And it says that Potiphar entrusted to Joseph everything he owned, and that from the time he put Joseph in charge of his household, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The Lord's blessing was on everything. And it says that with Joseph in charge, Potiphar didn't worry about anything except what he was going to eat. That's amazing, isn't it? Because Joseph decided he was going to make the best of a very, very bad situation. And he was going to be the best person he could be in that situation. And Potiphar sees that in him. And Potiphar trusts him. He trusts him with his money, with his other slaves, with his fields, with everything. There's one problem, though, and that would be Potiphar's wife. Now, the Bible tells us that Joseph was well-built and handsome. If you remember that Joseph's mother was Rachel, and remember what the Bible said about her, that she was very beautiful. So I guess Joseph got some good looks from his mom. But we know that that becomes a problem because Potiphar's wife decides that she likes Joseph. She likes him a lot. And so she starts trying to tempt Joseph to like her too. And she starts saying to him, I want you to love me. And he said, oh my, I can't do that. I mean, your husband, Potiphar, he's my master, and he's put me in charge of everything. He doesn't worry about anything in my charge. He trusts me to do the right thing. And I could never do something bad like that. That would be wicked and evil for me to love you. You're another man's wife. And my God would think it was a sin, and I could not do that. But you know what the Bible says? That day after day, she continued to tell him that. You know, when we know something's wrong, if we put in our hearts and our minds that if somebody asks us to do something wrong and we know it's wrong, we're going to already plan what we need to say. If some friends try to get us to do something we know our mom and dad wouldn't like and God wouldn't like, we don't need to try to make that decision when they're all say, come on, let's do this together. We need to already know what we're going to say, and we need to say no, and we need to not even have to think about it because we know we want to do the right thing. We're going to say no. And I think Joseph already knew that. So he didn't even hesitate. He just said no. And day after day, the Bible says he tried to avoid her. He tried not to be around her. That would be hard, wouldn't it? To have those same friends just all the time trying to get you to do the wrong thing. Well, one day, Joseph goes into the house to do his work, and all of the servants were outside. And I don't think he thought about that. And he goes in to do his work. Potiphar's wife grabs his robe that Potiphar's given him, and she says, come on, I want you to love me. And Joseph, he doesn't even talk to her this time, because she knows what he's going to say. He doesn't need to tell her again. He just lets her have his robe and he runs out of the house. Well, that didn't work, did it? So she's got a plan. She starts screaming and saying, that servant, that Hebrew servant, he tried to attack me. Well, the Bible says when Potiphar got home that night, she still got Joseph's robe right beside her. She says, that slave you brought into this house, he tried to attack me. And the Bible says that Potiphar was so angry. But I have to wonder who Potiphar was really angry with. Was he really angry with Joseph? After all, he trusted him with everything. Does he really think Joseph would do something like this? Does he know his wife pretty well and know maybe she would do something like this? Who knows? We're not told. But we do know that because of what she accused him of, Potiphar's going to have to put Joseph in jail. But we know that Potiphar is the captain of the guards, and he puts Potiphar in the prison that he's in charge of. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? Kind of like maybe he wants to keep an eye on Joseph and see what happens. So Joseph is now in jail. Did he do anything at all to deserve that? Absolutely not. He was trying to do his best not to get into trouble, wasn't he? But once again, listen to what the Bible says. That while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. And he showed him kindness and gave him favor in the eyes of the prison warden who took care of all the prisoners. And so the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners. And it says that the warden paid no attention to anything that was under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in everything he did. Wow. So once again, what could Joseph have done? I'm thrown in prison. I didn't do anything. I'm going to sit in this corner and I'm going to be mad the rest of the time. That I probably would have done something like that. I'd have probably said, I'm not going to be happy again the rest of my life now. I didn't do anything for making the right decision. This is what I get. But that's not what Joseph did. He's going to be the best he can be no matter where he is. Now one day, Pharaoh, remember he's the king, he becomes upset for some reason with his baker and with his cupbearer. Now keep in mind, if you're cooking for the king or you're the cupbearer, so you're giving the king his drink, you have to be very honest, don't you? Because what could you do to the king if you weren't honest and you were giving him his food or his drink and you didn't like him? Why, you could poison him, couldn't you? So the cupbearer's job was actually to taste and to drink. And if he didn't die from anything, then Pharaoh could do it. But something got Pharaoh upset with his baker and his cupbearer. Maybe Pharaoh got a little sick or something. I don't know. But he throws him in prison. And get this, the captain of the guard puts Joseph in charge of these two officials of the king. Now, who's the captain of the guard? Potiphar, remember? Potiphar puts Joseph in charge of the king's important officials here. So one day, Joseph goes by and he sees that they look very troubled. And he says, "Why are you so sad today?" And they said, Oh, we both had a dream last night, and we don't know anybody that can tell us what this dream means, and we're very worried about him. Joseph said, "Well, I certainly can't tell you what it means, but my God can. So go ahead and tell me. Tell me what your dream was." And so the cupbearer says, "Well, here was my dream. There was a grapevine, and it grew 3 branches. And on those branches, 3 big clusters of grapes grew. And I took Pharaoh's cup, And I squeezed the juice from the grapes into his cup, and I handed the cup to Pharaoh. What do you think that means? And Joseph said, God says the meaning of that dream is this. The 3 branches represent 3 days. And in 3 days, Pharaoh is going to give you back your job. And you're going to once again give Pharaoh his cup to drink. You're going to be restored to your place again. And he's like, whew. And get this. Now, this is what Joseph says. And he says, when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. For I was forcibly kidnapped and carried off from the land of the Hebrews where I lived. And even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in this prison. So then the baker says, oh, he got a good dream. He got a good report. Let me tell you what my dream is. So the baker says, now I've got 3 baskets of bread on my head. And in the top basket are breads of all kinds. And the birds come and they eat the bread away from it. What does that mean? Joseph said, well, God says it's not going to go well for you. Because in 3 days, Pharaoh is going to have you killed. Now, just as God had said in that dream, in 3 days, it's Pharaoh's birthday. And he throws a big old party, a big old feast. And he says, bring my cupbearer and bring my baker back up. And he tells the cupbearer, you have your job back again. But the baker, he cuts off his head. Just like Joseph's dream said. But now I want to tell you something really sad. Let me read this last verse to you. It says that they hanged the chief baker and cut off his head, just as Joseph has said to them. But the chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. Isn't that sad? Joseph does this for them. He tells him, you're going to get your job back, but all I'm asking is that you remember me to Pharaoh, and you tell him I'm in here, I was kidnapped, I don't deserve to be here. And he doesn't even remember Joseph. Very sad. But you know what? God's going to still be with him. Don't you believe? I believe he is. God's not through with him yet. I think that God kind of needed to send Joseph to school, maybe, you know. God has a plan for Joseph, a very important plan for Joseph. But before he can put him into that big plan, he's got to give him a little bit of training. He's got to learn how to manage a household of an important man like Potiphar. He's got to learn how to deal with prisoners and how to handle people in hard situations. But now he's still in prison. I can't wait to find out what's going to happen to him next week. Be the best you that you can be this week, all right? Try to keep that smile on your face and try not to just think about what you need, but think about mom, dad, grandma, because they're stuck with you too, huh? You may be stuck with them, but they're stuck with you, right? We're all stuck with each other. So we just need to be the best we can be. I love you. I miss you. Bye-bye.